Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Perfect, amazing. I'm so happy for being participating right here in the university, right, of the World Future Studies Federation. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Are
so
you
much.
there? Where are you right now?
In Monterrey, Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Yes, in the northern state of Mexico. Yes, in Mexico. So I hope you can visit us soon in Monterrey.
That would be lovely. Yes.
Great, excellent.
So we have another minute. Do you have slides for your presentation?
Yes, I do. I have my presentation right here. So I will be attentive to start sharing the presentation. Yes.
Okay. And um, oh, then it looks like we are almost ready to begin.
Perfect.
Welcome, participants. Thank you for joining us on this session. I am pleased to be hosting today from Montreal. And our panelist today is Rocio Vanessa Farias, who is the leader at MetConnecta Future Center and International Relations and Entrepreneurship Professor at Monterrey. She holds a master's in strategic foresight from the Graduate School of Public Administration and Public Policy EGAP Mexico. And she is a graduate of international relations from Tecnológico de Monterrey, Campus Monterrey. And the MetConnecta Future Center is focused on prospective studies about business and trend scenarios. It supports the development of people, projects, and companies to implement market-oriented solutions through simplified trend methodologies to reduce uncertainty with entrepreneurship, innovation, and networking, mainly in Latin America. And so I would like to leave the floor to Rocio Vanessa. And if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to write them down in the chat and we'll catch them as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, or maybe good morning to everyone. Yes, my name is Rocio Vanessa Farias, and I'm currently at Monterrey, Mexico. Thank you so much. So it's a pleasure, to have you join me today in this presentation that I call it Entrepreneurship and Foresight, Construction of Future Scenarios, where I would like to share briefly, a proposal that I have been working on for the past several semesters, mainly both at the entrepreneurship academic area, where I'm a professor about entrepreneurship, and also at MetConnecta, where I work with real Latin American entrepreneurs, mainly from Mexico, but also from Colombia and from Chile. So, okay, and if you have any questions, feel free or comments to present them at our Zoom chat. And after my presentation, we can talk about it. So let's start. Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to start sharing my screen with that presentation. Here it goes. I hope you can see it right now. And I'm so sorry, I'm going to turn a little bit my camera so my internet can work better. Yes, thank you. Here it is. Okay, so let's start with this presentation, Entrepreneurship and Foresight, Construction of Future Business Scenarios. Okay, first of all, what do you think about this quote? Or in other words, this killer quote, right? we are all time travelers on a journey into the future. Do you know what? Futurist authors as Edward Cornes suggest that foresight is like a skill, yes, that we can learn that enable us to anticipate many of the risks and opportunities that could confront in the future by being prepared for the needs and think in the long term for feasible and desirable achievements. Because by designing scenarios or the future, an entrepreneur, is better prepared for what it lies ahead and become like a kind of explorers, right? Ready for unknown scenarios. Thus, designing the future, you know what, should be vital as we work on the analysis of the present, because the future becomes like a kind of powerful force since it threatens the present with its disruptive potential. In other words, designing a future allows us to visualize and identify new business opportunities and ideas. In fact, the literature on future studies, known as FS, emphasizes like two kind of concepts. On one hand, we have the concept of foresight, right? As the art, as the science of anticipating future with its long-term focus. But also on the other side, we have that super interesting concept, mainly from the French school, that it's called la prospective stratégique, like a kind of a global and systemic approach where different kinds of variables can play a determinant role in the outcome of any given future. In order to construct future business scenarios, we need to develop previously, of course, an entrepreneurial mindset. What about this? Because entrepreneurs must be able to discover, create future business opportunities, apply anticipatory process, and why not frame a company's direction? Because future-oriented thinking encourages entrepreneurs to engage with uncertainty instead of avoiding it, right? And mainly in the initial stages or at the beginning of an entrepreneurial project, entrepreneurs need to think creatively about a long-term possibilities and of course scenarios, right? And after that, can decide which ones are the most likely to surface as reality. So in relation with this presentation, I propose to apply this, I don't know if I can call it simple framework, but a basic framework. Because of course, I know there is a wide range of qualitative and quantitative techniques and also different kinds of methods available right there, but some of them are appropriate than others for an entrepreneurship context, right? So this framework employs like a kind of core processes that helps entrepreneurs or students, learners, etc., to develop and strengthen their practice of futuring. Yes, let's practice futuring so they may participate in designing the future of its product, its service, its idea. So as you can see in this slide, the framework has three essential pillars or steps for developing this kind of entrepreneurial mindset through structured phases. First, the most important when we start a project or an idea, we have to understand a lot of the problem, right? And here we can apply different kind of techniques most applicable with an entrepreneurial experience to ensure, of course, comprehensive coverage and desired outcomes. For example, the output or the main final product that we can obtain by understanding the problem is the problem space diagnosis. So we can apply some techniques that in the next slide, I'm going to explain it to you, like environmental scanning, trends, megatrends, etc. The second step is in relation with discovery or try to identify the key variables, the insights. And here, this aligns with the linear model of entrepreneurship by, for example, consulting experts, right? About the topic under study or the industry that we are trying to research. And last but not least, we have this third step that is tries to work on the creation of the future scenarios. Yes. And also in the next slide, I'm going to explain it to you, this technique that it's called 5-type format. By the way, I would like to mention that this framework in this slide is an inspiration that came from two influential models in the field of foresight. On one side, the scenario method developed by authors such as Edward Cornish, but also the stages of a prospective process developed by my mentor, my professor, Guillermo Gándara. So these models are references, but I adapted to an entrepreneurial context. Because as you remember, when we start working on an entrepreneurial process, there are three steps, mainly three steps: the problem solution fit, the product market fit, and how we can scale. But in the foresight process, we need to understand the problems, the drivers of discovery, and last but not least, the creation of future scenarios. So what are the main three objectives of this proposal? First, what about if we apply a general process? Yes, it could be the first steps of a general process for developing a foresight mindset. Second, develop like a kind of future-oriented thinking. Yes, we have to start working on, be creative by using mainly in this proposal qualitative research techniques. Of course, we can apply some quantitative techniques, but right now, the thing is I'm going to explain it to you, these techniques that are more from a qualitative point of view. And third, because designing scenarios creatively, we can organize information to facilitate, future entrepreneurial projects. By the way, does this project can survive or not survive, right? Okie doke. So let's start with this first step is in relation with understanding the problem space. And that's the question, the problem. And yes, we need to know a lot of the problem space. This is step number one, has a specific object and is to understand like a spotted problem, in the market or in the society, I don't know, by uncovering underlying assumptions. Yes, that's a key word, assumptions about its future. The question is why this step matters? Because future thinking can be applied to any topic, any context, but to obtain insights or questions to share that kind of forward-looking action about that problem. So identifying a problem for a specific customer or a market allows us to be ready to offer, of course, a future solution, a future product, or a future experience. So you can see these three techniques right here in this slide that I propose to obtain information. Of course, all are directed towards the same objective. The first technique in the right side of the presentation is the environmental scanning. Yes, how can we scan? So entrepreneurs, learners must identify important information from different reliable media, maybe from websites, newspapers, magazine, etc. So, of course, this is according to the object of the study. After we obtain all the scanning information, we have to clusterize all of them like in different kind of areas. For example, from a social point of view, technological point of view, economics, environmental, etc. To allow us like this kind of vision of external factors that will help us understand it carefully. The second technique is about monitoring trends. Yes, trends are very important in future thinking because they are like a mind, kind of forces that move mankind in a particular direction. Depending on the topic of interest, we can make research in different, explore platforms like, just to mention, for example, Trend Hunter, TrendVZ, think tanks, business consultancies, etc. And the last technique, of course, this is so important. Make megatrends research, right? Megatrends are huge waves, like significant global impacts that generally are associated from one point, the market social pull or the market pull. And on the other way, the technology push, technological innovation. So for this information for megatrends, I don't know, you can research the World Futures Study Federation platform, the global challenges, sustainable development goals, megatrends, etc. Okay, so You can see right now in this slide that the final product or output from this previous step number 1 could be this tool that I call it the problem space diagnosis, where all the information we have to document about first, what is the problem or the topic of interest at the top of this tool. Second, we have to document or synthesize all the main findings obtained in the environmental scanning through, this technique that is called the SKIP V. S as social, T as technology, E as economics, E as environmental, P as politics, and why not V as values. Next, we have to fill all the information that we obtained from the trends and megatrends monitoring. And do you know what? This is a tool that I personally designed, very simple, just in order to document all the results that I already mentioned about the 3 previous techniques in this step number 1. Okay, so what about the step number 2? Yes, with all the previous information, we can start identifying, those kinds of drivers of discovery. In other words, identify like crucial variables, refer as, kind of elements that could be in reference with future emerging challenges. They are kind of shedding lights of key factors about the problem identified in the previous phase. Another question is why this step number 2 matters. Because after an entrepreneur or a learner has a comprehensive understanding of the context within the problem space, the identification of drivers become crucial since they are linked to future change factors and serve as fundamental elements of uncertainty, enable us to the identification of long-term possibilities scenarios. So you can see also in this slide, I call it tool number 2, that is named drivers and expert consultation, because we need to consider all the insights from previous tool number 1 and start documenting and planning to work in this tool. From where do we can obtain information, valuable information also? From experts consultation. It's super important. One recommendation is, for example, to create a list of experts in relation, of course, with the problem, maybe through friends, to your most important contacts, publications, professor, and try to interview in person, one-on-one, etc. What is going to be the final product or the output of this tool? It's going to be the key variables, right? But how can we feel or how can we document this tool? For example, the first is that we have to identify the drivers right there, in the left side of your screen, and we have to give it a name. Next, we have to identify like a kind of movements in relation with future hypotheses about that driver's name or movements. Then we can identify the indicators. Indicators are like a kind of reference measures that indicates where the future is headed, and it is recommended to have an indicator for each drivers. And last but not least, what is the source of verification? Like we say in Spanish, la fuente de información. It could be official, semi-official, quality of information is essential. For example, let's think about one driver is about hybrid car price. What is going to be the movement? Hybrid cars cost more than gasoline or gas cars. What is going to be the indicator? Well, it could be the average price of hybrid cars. And what could be the source of verification? Maybe I obtained that information from the National Institute of Statistics about the automobile industry. Yes, this is how it's gonna work, this is step number 2. And last but not least, the final step is creating scenarios. Yes, let us start working with our creativity about sketching the future. We can create scenarios about what might happen in the future of the topic under study through 5 different types of scenarios. Why is step number 3 is very important? Because as we create scenarios, in relation with entrepreneurship, we identify possibilities of what might happen and what could be the consequences in the most literal sense, analyzing the problem in the market, in a customer, etc., by breaking it down into components and looking carefully at each one. So in an entrepreneurial context, knowledge about what to expect in the future make us aware of, for example, the cost, the benefits. What about the products, the service of the future? What about the planning, or maybe the investments, or the creation, or the survival of the company or the startup, right? So you can see right here this technique and in relation with 5-type format. So first, when we start working in the creation of 5 scenarios, we can have those kind of scenarios, right? One of them could be a surprise-free scenario. Second, an optimistic scenario. Third, a pessimistic scenario, I know, or maybe a disaster scenario. And what about a transformation scenario? In the next slides, I will present to you how can we document each scenario, okay? Well, for example, when we start working with scenario number 1, yes, because taking in consideration the important information from step number 1 and all the information from step number 2, we have to take into the table all that information and start our script, our creativity. How could be a scenario from an optimistic point of view, where things will go better from the world than in the recent past? We have to give a title of these scenarios, yes. As we were, for example, working with a movie, yes, we have to give a name. So this super simple tool that you see right here, we put all the identified variables or the drivers from the previous stages. And after that, on the right side, we start describing that scenario, but in relation with the information obtained from the variables A, B, C, etc. Next, we have to start constructing the scenario number 2. And it is a quite pessimistic scenario. You can ask, but why pessimistic scenario? You know, in future, we have to work with different scenarios because the prospective strategy established that first, we have to be in the future, try to know all different possibilities. And when we have all the scenarios, we have to return to the present and start working, I don't know, maybe for how to obtain a scenario 1 or how to avoid maybe a pessimistic scenario. A third scenario that we have to start creating is like a kind of disaster scenario where something terrible wrong will occur in the world, you know? I know this is a killer word, worse than anything, but we have privileged experience. Also, we have to indicate a title of this scenario. On both scenarios, the same. We have to give a title and we have to establish the drivers, the same drivers, and the description of the scenario in relation with that key variables. The fourth scenario is called a transformation scenario, where something spectacularly marvelous happens to the world. Maybe something we never dared to expect. So give a name of the scenario and start working another time with the key variables, but the description of that variables are gonna be in relation with a transformation mood, you know? And the last scenario is like surprise-free. What about this surprise-free scenario? That things will continue as they are now. So let's start creating our imagination, obtaining information from the previous stages, considering the same variables, the drivers, and then start to describe the characteristics of those variables, but in the mood of a surprise-free, where things will continue as they are now. Last comments. What about these last comments? Okay, we have some key takeaways. Yes. For example, the first one is that foresight, of course, improves the ability of the entrepreneur, of the student, of the learner, of the expert, of the futurist to identify future ideas based on scenarios. Second, I think this kind of framework can encourage creativity. Why? Because when we start working on future scenarios stories, we have to validate, make research, and try to detect, important strategic information during the research. Also, this proposal will allow to have clear information about the problem solution fit. Remember, when we start working on an entrepreneurial process, the first step is to have very clear information, validation, pivot information in relation with the problem solution fit. And that's in clear fit match with the understanding the problem in a prospective or in a futurist process of investigation. And also, the last point is that future thinking generates an understanding of possible opportunities, right? Providing us input for a strategic planning. So before that, the last conclusion is that I think that it is highly recommended that the persons that work with this framework try to validate a lot the results obtained, because I think that consulting experts is the most important, help that we have to obtain and identify real business opportunities. But experts could be from the industry, I don't know, maybe from marketing areas, from financial areas, etc. So on all this process, the validation should involve documenting the outcomes of one-on-one interviews with industry experts, with represented individuals in relation with the market's characteristic profile of the customer. So yes, and I think that's it. And this proposal, was possible with the guidance and constant support of experts. So I would like to special thanks to Guillermo Gándara Fierro, also to Paul Farias, to Esteban Santamaria, Victor Melgarejo, and Felipe Salinas. And another time, congratulations to the World Future Studies Federation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Rocio. I'm waiting to see if we have any questions from the participants. Perhaps while we wait for people to enter them in the chat. One question I have for you, given the sometimes limited resources that entrepreneurs or startups will have, do you see opportunities for accelerators, for example, that often support groups of startups as being a place where they could provide this type of framework and expertise?
Yes, of course. Yes, accelerators are so important. And those are kind of spaces where we have a lot of networkings, when we start participating in events. And of course, accelerators works a lot with information of the documentation of results of the pivoting of the ideas, they're in the incubators, accelerators, or in the entrepreneurship zones. We can identify, of course, that kind of experts or specific persons that we could consult to obtain a strategic information for the construction of the scenarios, for the identification of the variables. Yes, that's a very good question. And that's a good comment. In fact, I encourage all of you that are in the entrepreneurship areas to participate in all you can, venture cafes, incubators, all of that kind of stuff. But yes, that's so important to obtain that information.
Thank you. We have a question or comment from Mike Jackson.
Hi, Rocio. Nice to meet you.
It's Mike. Hello, how are you?
Can you hear me? I'm good, thank you.
Yes.
Rocio, I can clearly see that you've been well trained, and I recognize all of those pieces in the jigsaw. But I wanted, if you don't mind, I was going to make some suggestions of how you might improve that thinking.
Great. great. That could be fantastic. Please, I need that information. I need your feedback, please. Yes.
Okay. So the first thing I'd suggest is that, the three bubbles you put up at the beginning, where you had problem identification. Entrepreneurs don't always just try to solve problems. And they also look to innovate completely new things that try to solve a problem that isn't here yet.
Exactly.
And I also know from all the things I've done over the last 30 years in Foresight that the world has moved on now in terms of executives particularly don't really want to talk about solving a problem. They really want to talk about what's the objective of the study. What are we trying to get to in terms of a decision? So they're looking for outcomes. So for me, I wouldn't just talk about problems. I talk about what is the outcome that we want from the future study. And that would apply to entrepreneurs like me. And I'm entrepreneuring at the moment because I'm just starting a new website, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I don't really want to go into my presentation now because that would be a shame. But the presentation is going to automate everything you said there, everything.
Great.
So you can just put in the outcome you want. You can ask the machine to tell you what it thinks is the future of whatever topic you want, and it will, and within 1 hour, it will do everything you said there. Now, the reason why I think that's important is because I believe that entrepreneurs just don't have the time, and many businesses don't have the time to undertake foresight because it's too complicated and too time consuming. And when I was a chief executive, I would have railed at the idea that somebody was going to spend 6 months on a foresight project and it potentially would have not produced anything, because there would be no real reason for me to do that. So I would have been blind at that time, not very good at understanding foresight, but many organizations won't spend that type of time. So I'm busy working on the idea that everything you said there can be automated, and I've already done that. And this week I actually ran the new machine on my own new company. And within an hour, I had a fantastic strategic plan that identified other things I should be doing. So I'm happy to show you that separately. But I would suggest that you need to start thinking about how you can use automation to make that go away. Yeah.
Perfect, Mike. Yes, love it. Yes, love all your recommendations. In fact, I took notes. And for me, it's awesome considering this information from you. And it will be great to be in contact because this framework is evolving, you know. I'm adapting, I'm taking feedback. And the thing is to, yes, try to work and help entrepreneurs worldwide. So excellent, Mike. Thank you so much for your comments. Excellent.
No problem. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Oh, I take note of your email. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You may be on mute, Catherine.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of this session, and I'll leave the floor. Thank you very much, Rocio, for your presentation, your thoughtfulness.